We've got the head of macro policy research, Elliot Hentov, joining us. Elliot, we have heard the messaging on the campaign trail. I mean, Republicans certainly, at least polls suggest that they have the upper hand, especially on the issue of the economy. In terms of the market reaction, how significant is it likely to be if they do, in fact, take control, at least of the House?
The market, I think, largely has priced in the outcome, and that is a Republican House with the Senate still up for grabs. Typically, we get a nice midterm rally in midterm cycles, particularly in the months. It starts in the month before the election because markets kind of can anticipate the outcome. And then it carries on another 4 or 5 months beyond that. I do not think that's going to be the conventional pattern this time around because there's no big news tomorrow, really. We know the Republicans are taking the House. We know there'll be divided government. The extent, the magnitude of the victory is still a question. But that's not relevant for market purposes. So instead, I think the macro cycle, where we are with the Fed raising rates, the balance sheet, economic data, I think that's still going to be a bigger driver in the coming days and weeks than the election.
So, the fact that the Republicans are likely to show have a strong showing may not be a surprise to the market, but there are some policy shifts that are likely to happen, right? As a result of Republicans taking at least control of the House, potentially the Senate. We've heard a lot about spending being one that maybe it is a shift towards austerity a bit more with Republicans in control. I mean, can you talk a bit about how you're looking at the policy swings that are likely to happen with a different party in power?
Yeah, just to be clear, I didn't say the elections don't matter. I just said that the markets are not going to take their cue tomorrow necessarily. You were right. There are some policy shifts coming. The biggest one is fiscal drag. I think the best case scenario is that you get a mild fiscal headwind as Republicans try to clamp down on government spending under a Democratic president. That's typically the pattern during divided government. But that's kind of the best case scenario. A worst case scenario is you lead to a severe fiscal drag, austerity, or possibly even repeated shutdowns that could be disruptive. So that there's some downside scenario there. Plus, there are some other policy issues that really matter to markets. One, of course, being the debt ceiling. That will come again at the latest in the first half of 2023, unless it gets resolved during the lame duck session. And that is definitely a market issue that markets are sensitive to. There's a big tail risk if something goes wrong. And even if nothing goes wrong, you see here on the chart very nicely that we've gotten more and more ripples in the treasury market during debt ceiling episodes in the past. But in the past, we had two parties that were narrowed together, now further apart. So the ripples could be actually much bigger.
Elliot, what about something like energy policy? I mean, this is one where we have seen very differing views between the parties. Though President Biden has kind of gone on the campaign trail sort of saying, well, it's the oil companies that aren't necessarily pumping enough gas. But we have seen energy broadly being a big market driver this year. Are we likely to see any significant shift in policy if, in fact, the Republicans do at least take partial control of Congress?
Not immediately. One game plan for the Republicans is to push for a more popular energy policy in exchange for lifting the debt ceiling. So there's a potential there. I'm rather skeptical we'll see a meaningful change. I think if at all, it'll be market forces again, just a higher elevated energy price that starts to mobilize a little bit more capex in the energy sector and therefore lifts U.S. production. But I do not think from the policy side we will see a big headwinds. Quite the contrary. I think the counter push will that's where we'll see a real stalemate in terms of policy.